before, but 2. And Carbs Part 2 is really going to get into applicable information that you can use in your life relating to carbs. So we always want to involve carbs in our lives. Having a daily diet that doesn't involve carbohydrates is really setting you up for a disordered relationship with food. Maybe not an eating disorder, but a disordered relationship with food. So I really want to emphasize the importance of including carbs in a well-rounded eating pattern. And I hope that you can help yourself and your families and friends have a great relationship with carbs. The other reason to really love carbs is because they are in so many tasty foods. So we all want to have a joyous, enjoyable, healthy relationship with food, and including carbs as part of that is really important. So the format of today and why we're on my couch is we're basically gonna have a chat with a friend. So I've asked one of my friends for her biggest questions about carbs, and it was amazing because they are some of the most frequently asked questions I get about carbs. Those were her questions. So I'm gonna answer her questions, and hopefully in the process, we'll learn all sorts of applicable, interesting information about food and carbohydrates. So the first question we should answer about carbs is, what is the recommended amount of carbs per day? If you think back to when we talked about the acceptable macronutrient distribution ranges, or the AMDRs, we know from that the US government recommends that 45 to 65% of our calories come from carbs every day. So that is one recommendation for total amount of carbs. The other recommendation is that you need at least 130 grams of carbohydrate per day. That is a minimum. It is absolutely not a maximum, it is a minimum. So 130 grams per day, and that's really to satisfy like the brain structures that would prefer to run on carbs versus ketones or any other fuel. So minimum 130 grams per day, and then the ideal functioning range is 45 to 65% of your calories from carbohydrates, which for most people is going to be much more than 130 grams per day. We also have some sub-recommendations for different types of carbs. So for example, the dietary guidelines suggest that we get 10% or less of our calories from added sugars. And in fact, in the 2020 to 2025 dietary guidelines report, which is in process, they are suggesting 6% or less of our calories from added sugars. Whether that will get into the final guidelines or not, we don't know. But right now it's 10% or less of your calories from added sugars. Another subtype of carbs is whole grains. So we'll define whole grains in a second, but we want to get 50% of our grains intake to be whole grains. It's hard to figure out if you're meeting that, so basically I just try to get as many as possible, but I would never do the math on that because it's impossible. One marker of whole grains is whether those grains have fiber, and so there's also recommendations for fiber, and they differ for men and women. They also differ by age, so as you age, you have to eat less fiber, but there are particular guidelines for how much fiber we should be getting, and for women, it starts out if you're older at like 20 grams, men it's around 30 grams, and then if you're younger, you actually need more fiber than if you're older. So those are the carbohydrate guidelines, and they kind of guide what type and how many carbs we should be eating for optimal health. And so when I say carbohydrates, I'm really talking about our fruits, some vegetables, our grain foods, and then milk. So grain foods are things like bread, rice, farro, quinoa, cookies, cake, flour. Anything with flour in it is going to be a grain food. Are some carbs better than others? And I think this question comes from the need or the desire to compare things like sugars and added sugars to fiber and whole grains, and are some better than others? I can't really answer this without specifying that it might depend on the situation. So for example, if I'm running a marathon, then I want those sugary, quick hit carbs. Foods with added sugars would be really good. Like jelly beans, gels, Gatorade, all of those are necessary so that my stomach can quickly digest, because remember, the monosaccharides and the disaccharides, which are present in your sucrose and a lot of your sugars that are added to foods, those digest very quickly. They don't need a lot of breakdown, versus our starches, our fibers, those either can't be broken down or they take longer to cut all the chains up of polysaccharides. So if I'm in an active situation where I need quick energy, like a marathon, I'm gonna want those sugary sources. But if I'm in my day-to-day life, trying to maximize my long-term health, I wanna make sure to incorporate these fiber carbs into my diet. So I call some carbs carbs with superpowers. We're not gonna villainize any particular carb, but there are certain carbs that have these kind of superpower qualities. Let's talk about the superpower of whole grains. So what does being a whole grain mean? What are whole grains? Well, flour is normally milled to refine whole wheat flour to white flour. And really what that means we're doing is we're removing the bran and the germ of the grain and leaving only the endosperm. So in a refined flour product, you're only going to have the endosperm, that inner white part of the grain. In a whole grain flour, you're going to have all the parts of the grain. So you're going to have bran, germ, and endosperm. And so when we're talking about whole grains, we're talking about grains that have retained all the parts of the grain. And this is important because a lot of the fiber that is in a grain food is contained in the bran and the germ. And so we want to be consuming that fiber, and we'll talk about why in just a minute. But whole grains indicate that the fiber has been retained. And sometimes you can differentiate a whole grain product because it will have, like, whole wheat flour has a brown color versus white flour that has a white color, but not always. So you don't want to rely on color to tell you what a whole grain is. You really want to look at labels, and you'll be able to tell what a whole grain is because it will say whole wheat flour, whole corn flour, whole flour. If it has the word whole in it, you know that it is a whole grain. So you really need to read those ingredient lists to figure that out. There are these things called whole grain stamps that can tell you if a product contains some whole grain. They don't appear on every product though, because you have to pay as a manufacturer to be able to use them, and not all manufacturers will. So there's 3 stamps, and the first stamp to talk about is the 100% stamp. So the 100% whole grain stamp means that all the grain in that product is whole grain, and as a minimum, the product has to have at least 16 grams of whole grain, which equals 1 serving of whole grains. So if a product has at least 16 grams of whole grain and the only grain in the product is a whole grain, it can use this stamp. If all the grain in the product is whole grain, but it only has 12 grams of whole grain, it has to use the 50% stamp that we'll talk about next, because it doesn't reach the 16 gram threshold. But if you see a 100% stamp, you can pretty much know that that product is full of whole grain. The next stamp is the 50% stamp, and the 50% stamp means that the product has at least half of its grain is whole grain. And as a minimum, the product has to have at least 8 grams of whole grain, because that equals a half serving of whole grains. And so if you see the 50% stamp, you can know that there's at least 8 grams of whole grains in that product, and that half the product's grain at least is whole grain. And then there's a basic stamp, and the basic stamp means that the product contains some whole grain, but it's mostly refined grain. It still has to have at least 8 grams of whole grain, just like the 50% stamp, but it's just going to have more refined grain because it doesn't have at least 50% whole grain. So again, even in the basic stamp, you know that it contains at least half a serving of whole grains. It just may also contain a lot of other grains. To make these concepts more concrete, I thought we would take a tour of the cereal aisle in my house so that I can show you what products have the stamp, which ones don't, and kind of suss it out based on the ingredient list. So let's take a look at that.
To demonstrate how you find whole grains on a food label, I thought we'd look at a bunch of cereals. Let us start with the oatmeal. The first ingredient and the only ingredient is organic whole grain rolled oats. So this is 100% whole grain, yet it doesn't have the stamp but it does say 100% whole grain. And it probably just doesn't have the stamp because it doesn't want to pay for the stamp. But that is just, I wanted to point this out because not every product that has whole grains is going to have a stamp. And we'll see that again in a minute. All right, here's an example of a product that does have the whole grain stamp on it. There it is. So this one is the basic stamp, and so the ingredients of this cereal are yellow corn flour, cornmeal, whole grain rolled oats, sugar, yada yada. So it does have the whole grain is probably either in the whole grain rolled oats or the yellow corn flour, depending on how that was processed. But we know it has at least 10 grams of whole grain per serving, thanks to the stamp. So that was helpful. And then here's their frosted mini wheats. And this also has a whole grain stamp, and in fact has 100% of whole grains. And if we look at the ingredients, we know why. Whole grain wheat and then sugar. So it really is just wheat and sugar, and so that's why it's going to get the 100% whole grain stamp. And then lastly, we have these multigrain squares from Cascadian Farm, and it says right on the front that they have 35 grams of whole grain per serving, and the ingredients are whole grain, rice, cornmeal, sugar, and that's all. But again, it doesn't have the stamp on it, probably because they didn't want to pay for it, but it's just going to tell you how many whole grains. And in fact, I would say that when products just tell you how many whole grains, it's more helpful than the stamp.
Carb with superpowers is really your fiber, and fiber comes in two types. We have soluble fiber that dissolves in water, so it's going to be like your oatmeal, it's kind of mushy when it meets water, and then your insoluble fiber, which does not dissolve in water, and that's going to be kind of like the outsides of plants, the bran of wheat. So these things are like the corn kernel outside. You're not going to be able to digest that, it's going to go straight through. So fiber has, the insoluble and the soluble fiber have different health benefits, and I want to show you both of them so you understand the true power, the superpower of fiber.
So there are these two types of fiber. The first one is soluble fiber, and soluble fiber just means that it dissolves in water. So when it dissolves in water, it's going to form like a gel. And you're going to find it in foods like oats, citrus fruits, legumes, prunes, sweet potatoes. So you can imagine when all of these foods are cooked or hit water, they get kind of a jelly consistency. Oatmeal, it's super jelly. So imagine something like that moving through your digestive tract, and that's soluble fiber, making it that kind of viscous jelly consistency. Soluble fiber has a bunch of really important health benefits. The first is that it reduces cardiovascular disease risk, and it does this because of its gel-like qualities. It forms a gel in your digestive tract, and that binds a substance called bile. And bile is really important for transporting cholesterol. So if it's binding bile, it's also binding cholesterol, and then you're getting rid of them. So it's moving out both of those in your stool. And so because it's binding bile, and therefore what bile is carrying, cholesterol, it forces your liver to use cholesterol stores to make more bile. So because normally you would just recycle bile, once you're getting rid of it with this fiber, you have to use cholesterol to make more, therefore you don't have cholesterol free floating around in your blood as much. Soluble fiber also slows digestion and absorption. This is because it takes your body longer to work through the fiber chains. It has to kind of sort things through, try to chop up what it can of the mono, di, and polysaccharides, and then it's just slower to move this like jelly substance through. So this is going to prevent blood glucose spikes. So even if you were to eat a really sugary food, like a bunch of jelly beans, if you ate them in a bowl of oatmeal, it's going to take you longer to digest and absorb the sugar in those jelly beans than if you just ate them as a snack on their own. And because of this increased time to digest and absorb, it takes longer for your blood to get the glucose from the jelly beans, for example. And so you're not going to have as many spikes of blood glucose. It's going to stay more flatlined, which is good. You want to avoid spikes. Other health benefits: soluble fiber relieves constipation, which is when you feel like you need to go to the bathroom, but you haven't pooped in a while. That's feeling constipated. And so fiber will move things through to prevent that. And because it's moving things through your digestive tract, it's promoting a healthy gut microbiome, and all of these things help prevent digestive tract cancers like colon cancer. So soluble fiber, it's great for cardiovascular disease, it's really good for blood glucose control, and it's great for digestive health. Yay, soluble fiber. The other type of fiber is the insoluble fiber, and that just means it's not soluble in water, so it's not going to form these jelly substances. And you're going to find it, therefore, in different foods. So you're going to find it in whole grains, and you're going to find it in like the bran of the grain. So the outside layer of the grain. You're going to find it in hulls of seeds. Even like strawberry seeds have insoluble fiber. Skins of fruits and veggies, so like the skin of corn or the strings on celery. Carrots, chickpeas are just other examples where you're finding insoluble fiber. And insoluble fiber health benefits are a little bit different than soluble. It mostly is focused on your digestive tract, and it's going to really help relieve constipation because you can't digest insoluble fiber. It's just going to come out the other side, but it helps give bulk to your stools because it stimulates the colon to release mucus and water, therefore making your stools softer and easier to move through. Because of this, you're going to have decreased hemorrhoid risk, and hemorrhoids are like little protrusions of veins in your anal and rectal area. They can be really painful, they can bleed, and they can happen when you're constipated or when you have really hard stools. So it's nice to have soft stools to move things through. And then you're going to have also decreased colon and rectal cancer risk because you're moving things through, you're keeping your gut microbiome happy because you're giving it things to work on. And just by not being constipated, you get like toxins and other things out of your digestive tract more quickly than if they're sitting in there for multiple days because you don't have stool moving through. So you want to move that through, and insoluble fiber is going to help you do that. So those are our fibers, our superpower fibers.
Next question. Can you get too much fiber? Well, yeah, you can eat too much fiber, especially if you go from eating very low level of fiber to eating tons of fiber in a short period of time. You're probably going to feel that in your digestive system. But there's no upper limit established for fiber, so the government has not told us that you shouldn't go above this limit. So it really is a personal digestive system preference. Sometimes if I eat too much fiber, I will feel like my stomach is not operating optimally in terms of maybe you get too much gas or things just flow through too much, you have to go to the bathroom too much. So each of us are going to be individual, but you can feel effects from eating too much fiber. It's just very rare for most Americans to eat enough fiber. Next big question that I get a lot is, how do carbs from sugar impact the body negatively? And again, this question kind of grates on me because sugar is not our enemy. It gets such a bad rap because of the way that we eat in this country and our relationship with food, but actually sugar can provide us energy when we really need it. I gave the marathon example before where you really need it, and it can also bring joy to our lives because it's in a lot of really tasty foods. But the reason that sugar is different and foods that have a lot of sugar get digested differently is just because of how they get digested and absorbed. And this takes us back, and I'll link back to Carbs Part 1 video where we talked about digestion and absorption. But sugary foods, so like your candy, your simple crackers, so crackers with not a lot of fiber, your potato chips a little bit, but they have a lot of fat, so it'll be different. But anything that's like a really high sugar content, ice cream, things like that, They are full of mono and disaccharides, and those are a lot easier for us to absorb and digest than our polysaccharides and our fibers. So we can quickly digest the monosaccharides and disaccharides in a lot of sugary foods and quickly absorb that sugar. It's absorbed into our blood, and then we need to send out insulin to signal to cells to take that sugar out of the blood, get it out of there, it's too high in the blood. So we get like an insulin spike. On your way back down from an insulin spike, you can feel tired and lethargic, and it's just not great for your body to be spiking insulin all day long. So that is where sugar kind of gets its bad rap from. But there's a lot of caveats involved in this, and one of them is that when you eat these sugary foods combined with other foods, you won't get the same insulin spike. So if you eat a piece of candy as part of a meal with fat, protein, and fiber, you're not going to get as big of an insulin spike because fiber, fat, and protein are harder for us to digest and absorb. It takes longer. So because it takes longer, we're not spiking insulin as much. So that's one thing that can happen. I'd also like to say a special note about fruit here, because fruit can be a high sugar food, but fruit also has a lot of water and usually a lot of fiber. And so that again is going to lessen the impact of the sugar in fruit on your whole body system. This whole line of thinking also brings us to another common question I get, which is, what about the glycemic index of food? So let me explain what glycemic index is. Glycemic index is just a measure of a food's impact on your blood sugar.
Quick overview of glycemic index, because mostly I think it's pretty much bullshit and it's not helpful and it's just not going to be useful. But a lot of people have questions about it, so I just want to explain it quickly. Glycemic index is really a measure of how a food elevates your blood glucose, and it's based off of it's all relative to how much a load of glucose would elevate your blood glucose. So if you ate straight glucose, what would happen to your blood glucose? Glycemic index therefore gives all foods a value in terms of how they elevate your blood glucose, and we can compare them to straight glucose. This is not very helpful. Here is a chart of glycemic index values, and you can see the green ones are foods that have a low glycemic index, the red ones have a higher glycemic index. So glucose itself is going to have like 100, that's what we're referencing. And then things like baked potato, watermelon are all high. Foods that are lower are foods with fat and protein or fiber. So even pizza has a very low glycemic index. Peanuts, spaghetti, grapefruit have low glycemic indexes because they either have fiber or fat and protein. Now, you also see glycemic load on this chart, and glycemic load takes into account the grams of available carbohydrate. So it's looking at each food on this chart and saying, well, how many actual grams of carbohydrate can we digest in this food? So where we see these things change a little bit is if we look at the bottom of the chart, glucose still has a very high glycemic index, which we would expect. But then other foods like popcorn, watermelon, and white bread are going to have lower glycemic loads than glycemic indexes because popcorn and watermelon has a lot of water, popcorn has a lot of fiber, and so those two things are going to lower the amount of available carbohydrates in like a cup of watermelon or 2 cups of popcorn, and therefore they're going to lower the glycemic load. If you're confused at this point, great, I've proved my point. This is a useless system because it is so freaking confusing, and it also doesn't take into account that we almost always eat foods in combination rather than in isolation. So you might be like, oh my gosh, I ate a baked potato that has a high glycemic index, but you might have eaten it with steak, which has a low glycemic index. And if you eat those as a meal, how does that average out? So glycemic index is just really not a helpful tool, but it had a few moments of fame recently where pop culture was very into it as the next it thing for dieting. So it's good to kind of be familiar a little bit with what it's talking about, but it's really completely useless.
glycemic index also brings us to another question that I get a lot about carbohydrates I got from my friend. And this question is, why do low carbohydrates work? And are they also bad for you? First, we need to define work. What does it mean for a diet to work? Does it mean that you lose weight in the first week, in the first month, over the first 6 months, over the first year, over the rest of your life? Because the unfortunate, or maybe fortunate truth, depending on your perspective, is that we don't know of any diets that work forever. The diet industry has like zero efficacy for diets that work forever. And low carb diets especially are no better than any other diet once you look at their results past 6 months. So up to 6 months, you might see more weight loss on a low carb diet, but then once you hit 6 months to a year to past that, other types of diets do just as well. So whether it's Mediterranean, a low fat, whatever it is, they're all kind of performing the same. And what happens is you lose weight down to like a year, and then it's the slow climb back up. So that's very frustrating to people that want to be in a different body size. And remember, we are not upset with people who want to change their body size, because our society kind of tells everyone that they should want to be at a certain body size. So we can get upset at all the charlatans and annoying people that are pushing these diets that don't really work for the long term, make people's relationships with food much worse. Because once you go on a diet, you can get into diet cycling, which we'll talk later, and you can end up at a higher weight than you were at before you start the diet. Super frustrating. So most of the people that are pushing diets are pushing things that are horrible and do not work. And the reason that you'll lose weight more quickly on a low carb diet, well, there's a few reasons. One is that it's highly restrictive. So as soon as you start just cutting out full macronutrient classes from your diet, there's just less for you to eat. And a lot of high carb foods taste really good. Cookies, cake, pies, ice cream, they're all out on a low carb diet. So if those were part of your diet before and you're really sticking to it, you're just automatically eliminating quite a bit of food. The other reason that low carb diets will result in fast weight loss is because when you don't eat carbohydrates are always associated with a lot of water. Remember, they mean carbon and hydrate, water. So when you don't have carbohydrates as part of your fueling, you don't have them in your body stored, you lose a lot of water weight. So initially on low carb diets, people will lose a lot of water weight, and that will kind of launch their weight loss. But it's also important to remember that fiber is super good for our colon health. We talked about all the things that soluble and insoluble fibers do, and if you're on a low carb diet, it can be hard to meet your fiber recommendations because you're not eating whole grains very much. You might be eating some vegetables to give you fiber, but that's about it. And so you're gonna miss out on all the benefits of fiber. So that's a nutrient specific reason not to go on a low carb diet. You may also have a B vitamin issue because a lot of our B vitamins are intaked through fortified grains and whole grains. If you're not eating those, you might have a deficiency. I'd say the biggest thing that is bad about a low carb diet is just how it destroys your innate relationship with food, your ability to eat when you're hungry, stop when you're full, and have a wide variety of food in your life. It puts so many of our foods in a restrictive box. They're out, and so guess what you're gonna do when you can't eat those foods? You're gonna think about those foods all day. And we know this happens because now there's all these knockoff, like keto friendly or low carb diet friendly foods. So there's like keto or low carb bread. That is crazy because bread is like the carb on record, right? Like the OG carb food, bread. It would be best if people could rehabilitate our relationships with food so that we didn't feel like things were restricted and we could respect what our body wants us to be eating. We're not there yet, but I hope that we will get there. Okay, long, drawn out, somewhat ranty, but I'm feeling a little salty today, so that's not surprising. It's really hot when I'm filming this video, probably supposed to reach 100 degrees today. It's a Sunday, but yet I'm working on these videos because I love you guys. And I get really annoyed when people won't eat carbohydrates. That's just, I get really, that sends me. So I apologize. I don't want to offend anybody. But it also, if you're restricting carbohydrate, I really just want you to know that there's another way. You don't have to have that as a thing. There's another way to be with food. Okay, so I hope that this has answered some of your big burning questions about carbohydrates. And what I hope more than anything is that you will continue to eat carbohydrates because they are yum, yum, yum. And they will give you energy and help you form a really powerfully healthy relationship with food.